Have you noticed that the Master Sword in the Tears of the Kingdom logo looks a little bit different? When we take a look at it, the first half is the Master Sword, but it does show a little bit of that rust that we've seen from previous footage. But the bottom half shows this runic green-like blade. What's going on with that? What is the deal here? What are they planning for the Master Sword in The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom? Well, that's what we're talking about today.
Hey, listen!
Welcome everyone, this is On Just Restart, and this time we are talking about the Master Sword in Tears of the Kingdom, and what's going on with it, and what the plan may be for the Master Sword in this game. So let's talk about the circumstances we understand about the sword so far. So from the trailers, what we sort of figure is that something happens as Link and Zelda are exploring underground Hyrule. They come up to this mummified creature that appears to be the source of Calamity Ganon. We presume it's Ganondorf, and a little bit of mayhem, a little bit of a scuffle ensues, and something happens to Zelda. She's lost, and something happens to Link. The malice gets on his arm, it appears to attack his arm, and also at some point we see the green-like hand that we presume is of Zonai nature fuses with Link's hand, and we see him having this new form of a hand and Sheikah Slate-like abilities later on with the footage. But we also see that the Master Sword has been destroyed, and it appears that during this attack of all of this malice, it was ruined. And what's interesting about this is that it actually makes a pretty good amount of sense when you piece it all together. So I pulled this from Creating a Champion. It's talking about the Master Sword. The Master Sword is the only blade of its kind in this world. It was damaged during the Guardian's assault during the Great Calamity as Link fled with Princess Zelda. After Link fell in battle, Zelda delivered the sword to its pedestal in the Korok Forest so that it might recover. She knew that when Link woke from the slumber of restoration, it would find its way into his hand once again. And here you'll notice some rough concepts, as they say, and each one the sword's progressively more damaged, but with the third and final one on the right here, you'll see it's medium damage plus covered in malice, and the biggest difference of this version versus the others is the rust. So it appears that malice is what causes the rust. So then when we take a look at the final design of the damaged Master Sword from the Calamity Ganon attack, you see the damage that's there, and the implication is this was done by malice, and it needed 100 years like Link to recover fully. And that was just the malice from the Guardians during the Calamity Ganon attack. So the implication here, when Link and Zelda were exploring underground Hyrule and they met with the source of the Calamity, which we presume is Ganondorf, that malice is denser than ever before. And that malice attacked Link straight on. And then we see the Master Sword more wrecked than it ever has been before. And what's interesting about this is that we actually have seen some concept art from Breath of the Wild that shows that they were already considering a Master Sword that wasn't just damaged like it was in Breath of the Wild, but in half, like we're seeing for Tears of the Kingdom. And when we take a look at this concept art, they're also showing Link with something off about his right hand, but his right hand has different abilities with this green-like energy. Does it not sound familiar? So I believe there is some level of a connection here to what we're seeing in the logo with the Master Sword, with its rust and half the blade having this green-like energy to it. So now let's get into the theory here. My theory is that there is going to be a grand effort to restore the Master Sword, which really shouldn't come as a shock because this has been done in several different Zelda games. Some examples: in Skyward Sword, they were forging the Master Sword. In the Wind Waker, the Master Sword lost its power and Link had to go to a few different temples. Even in Breath of the Wild, there was a DLC to power up the Master Sword. This isn't new territory here. The only difference is that the Master Sword has been more damaged than it ever has been before. But what makes this more interesting though, is that because it has been more damage than ever before, and because we now know that the malice is what has caused the damage, the implication here is that the malice, that dense malice right next to the source of all of the calamity, that corpse that we presume is Ganondorf, is likely stronger than ever before. And that's why the Master Sword has been more damaged than it ever has been before. So, unlike previous Zeldas where there's been this effort to restore the Master Sword to its proper form, that may not be enough this time, because the Master Sword was already in its proper form leading into that battle where everything was ruined. So, this time around, while I think there will be an effort to power up the sword, it's going to be more than just powering up back to normal. It's going to be about doing something beyond that. And then we take a look at this logo, it is showing off a sword that's different. Now, this different looking sword, it itself may not be more powerful than the base Master Sword. As I alluded to earlier, one of those previous pieces of concept art, we saw Link's hand using green-like energy to take on different shapes. Who's to say that Link, with his right hand having these different abilities, still holding the Master Sword with his right hand, as we've seen he still uses his right hand to actually use swords, that it projects this green-like energy that we've seen throughout the different trailers. We assume it's like Zonai magic or something, and it creates a blade. This, I feel like, is pretty conceivable. But is this the sword's final form, or is there going to be something beyond that? Or is this form stronger than what the Master Sword used to be? That's hard to say, but I do think that a big part of the story is going to be about restoring the Master Sword. If they just leave it damaged forever, I don't know. That doesn't sit right with me totally, although Tears of the Kingdom is at the very end of the timeline. There may be a certain finality to different things. Maybe the Master Sword will never be the same again. Maybe Ganondorf, or whatever is the source of Calamity Ganon, will be gone forever. Maybe they'll finally eliminate it in Tears of the Kingdom. But I just think it's interesting that they're going for a very different look with the Master Sword this time around. And this could be alluding to not just the sword looking different, but different abilities. Something that I felt was a little bit lacking in Breath of the Wild was sword combat. Something they seem to have taken a step back with Breath of the Wild compared to the other Zeldas is sword combat. Both Skyward Sword and Wind Waker and Twilight Princess all made different advances in their own ways for sword combat. Now, I'm not saying I want motion controls in Tears of the Kingdom, but something like what we saw in Twilight Princess where there were different actions that made sense depending on the circumstances. Imagine if they were to bring that back, or incorporate other abilities that would be similar, that would offer up different advantages depending on the circumstances, and this would vary up sword combat. If Link's special hand has all these different powers, and some of its powers going through the Master Sword to create a blade, what else could they do? Maybe the Master Sword could simply be an extension of this green power, and maybe it could form different shapes, not just a sword, or at least it could lead to some different attack combinations that would be pretty interesting. From one of the patents for Tears of the Kingdom, we're at least seeing that they've considered mixing up bow combat in the air, and I feel the implication is that, well, they may be looking at other ways to expand combat in the air or perhaps beyond. Tears of the Kingdom is building off of Breath of the Wild, so I don't think it's much of a leap to think that they're going to be improving and advancing upon a lot of different ideas they already had, including the combat with the sword. And if the Master Sword has such a different look on the very logo for Tears of the Kingdom, I think it's going to be of some importance here, not just from an aesthetic perspective, but from a gameplay and story perspective. So I believe that the entire journey is going to have something to do with powering up the Master Sword, using it in combat, it being different than before, and it's probably also going to look pretty darn cool. But what do you guys think? What do you make of the plan for the Master Sword in Tears of the Kingdom? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.